Hello and thanks for joining us this week on the Bison Basketball Show. I'm Brian Shawn. 1 month remains in conference play for both the NDSU men's and women's hoop squads. The Bison men are on top of the league standings at the midway point, but a lot of tough tests still remain. That started with a trip to IUPUI, a team the Bison rallied to beat at home just a couple of weeks ago. NDSU 3-1 on the road in conference play coming into the matchup, and the home team jumped up early. Aaron Brennan, the corner three. Jaguars 14 of 24 from long range in the game. Paul Miller hit a pair of first half threes, getting the friendly roll here from the top of the key. Miller 20 points on 7 of 18 shooting. Bison trailed by 7 at the half. The two teams would go back and forth in the second half. Dexter Warner, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 2 of them here on the little jump hook. That would pull the Bison within 1. Then with NDSU down 4, Kai Cabellas answering with a huge triple. He had it 11 points, and it's back to a 1-point game. Under a minute to go, tied at 70, Darrell Combs the pull-up jumper for 2. He had 10 points to go along with 7 assists. But Tyson Ward, some huge plays in crunch time. The freshman hard to the basket for the two-hand slam to tie it at 72, and we head to overtime. In OT, Ward stepping in for the steal, taking it all the way for the layup plus the foul. He had a career-high 22 points to go along with 7 rebounds. Matt O'Leary led all scorers with 24 points, including 6 three-pointers. The two inside here put IUPUI up 3 with a minute left. The Bison a chance to tie it in the closing seconds. Miller, the long attempt is wide right, and NDSU drops a thriller 86-81 final, losing only their second conference game of the season. We now welcome in men's head coach Dave Richman to talk a little bit about the Bison men's basketball team moving forward here into February. A month left to go. The start of the second half is finally here. You had the weekend free. I think that's the last weekend you've had free in a long time. What was that like for you and for the guys, and how did you handle that as a coach?
Well, I think it's good. I think it's a balance, and we really stressed it coming out of that ORU win. We're really proud of our guys anytime you can get a home win against a good quality opponent like that. And it's important to do 2 things. One, you can't relax, you can't get comfortable, but in a sense you need to recharge. We've got some guys that got a high amount of mileage on their legs a little bit, some guys that are banged up, some tweaked ankles, some shoulders that are banged up. And so it's important for them to get away a little bit, but you can't lose that focus, that edge, that rhythm that you're in.
I know you have a month left of conference play. It's now Wednesday, Saturday here the rest of the way. In the last 8 games, you have 4 home, 4 road. You know, these are helpful, I think, Coach, because you have players that have been here in this situation before. How much does that help of having those guys that have played in big games in this situation in the past?
Yeah, there's no question. Dexter, Carlin, AJ, Paul, those guys in particular, those juniors and seniors, those vets, so to speak, that have been there, done that. Not only do you, as a coach, do you really rely on that and those experiences that they've been through, but those younger guys are really paying attention to how they handle things. And you know, in so many senses right now, early February, you're in those quote-unquote dog days. And when the light of the tunnel at the beginning of the conference season isn't so bright, you're right in the middle. You're right in the middle, and you don't have that light towards the end. And so, but what good teams do is they push through, and they understand the importance of a practice here today. They understand the importance of a film session or a shoot around, and every little thing matters because, like you just said, we're here. There's 4 weeks left. There's only so many opportunities left.
3 games now straight at home. It's funny how the schedule works. You and I have talked about that a lot just because of the 9 teams. South Dakota, and then all of a sudden South Dakota State and Denver, 3 games in essentially a week. How important it is in this stretch. I know it's nice to be home, but that also means you really got to hold home court as well, which has been a big key for you guys.
I think that's the big thing, holding home court. As tough as it is to get any win in this league, it's so important, so vital to take care of business at home. And those are 3 very quality opponents. Obviously, just an unbelievable back-and-forth game, especially in the second half against USD. South Dakota State, you can see them starting to get into a rhythm a little bit, and obviously Denver, a team that took care of us at their place. So, but as much as it's about those 3, again, it's about us getting better every single day. And I know that sounds like coach speak, but I really need to continue to stress that to our guys, because if we lose an opportunity to get better, lose an opportunity to compete, it can come back and bite you in the long run.
Every game has been so competitive in the league. It's really amazing. You guys are no exception. In 5 of your 7 games, you've actually trailed in the last 2 minutes of the games that you've won. It's really come down to the last 4 and 5 minutes, Dave, and I know culture is a big part of what you impress. Is that where the culture really shines through, in your opinion? How you guys really play down the stretch when it matters?
You know, I really think so, and I have nothing else to believe other than that, and that's what we're going to keep banging on too, is that's culture. I think our kids, again, you talked about it earlier, those 4 kids have been there, done it, they've been in those experiences, and you can really see the poise, the execution down the stretch, the been there, done that, so to speak, moment. And again, I think our culture is, as much as it's us doing our thing, sometimes it's, you know, the mindset of where you've been with, we call it Jason Miller time. You know, the toughness, pushing through, finishing the game, being the tougher team, being the more together team. And you go back and look at it, we've had a tremendous amount of success in games decided by 10 points or less. And I really firmly believe that's our culture, that's our togetherness.
I know one thing you've talked about a lot, hey, we take care of the ball, we're doing that really well. What is one thing that you would like to say? We like to do this better in February than what we did in January when you look back at the last 8 games.
You're going to hear me again. It's something that we're talking about all the time, but defending and rebounding. And I really think if we can become a better team in the gaps and keep teams out of the paint, limit their opportunities right at the front of the rim, that makes us a better offensive, or a better defensive rebounding team. Limiting the opponent's offensive rebounds, and I think those are the 2 big things. They really everything goes back to defending, rebounding, and taking care of the ball. And I'm proud of our guys how we're taking care of the ball. I think we've made some steps defensively, but until we're done, there's always room for improvement, especially defensively.
All right. Good luck in the second half. Good luck specifically against South Dakota on Saturday.
Thank you. We're going to need it.
It's going to be a fun one at the Shack for sure. Stay with us. More to come here on the Bison Basketball Show. We check in with the Bison women, take a look at their games this past week, and also a chat with Coach Walseth. That's coming up next.
The Bison Basketball Show on Midco Sports Network is presented by Nodak Mutual Insurance Company and Midco Windows.
Welcome back. The NDSU women's basketball team started off Summit League play as one of the highest scoring teams in the conference, but as of late, the shots are not falling quite as easily. A tough road test for the Bison last week, taking on first place South Dakota in Vermilion. NDSU handed the Coyotes their only loss in conference last month coming into this matchup, and a good start at the Sports Center. Brianna Jones posting up, scoring 2 inside, but just 12 points in the paint for NDSU in the game. Sarah Jacobson was limited to just 1 3-point basket on the night, but this triple would tie the game. It was 17-all after 1 quarter. The Herd continued to go back and forth with USD in the second quarter. Riley Jacobson the friendly role. She had 7 of NDSU's 13 bench points. Taylor Thunstedt would also hit 3 first-half shots from outside the arc. The long bomb would end a 9-0 Yotes run. But South Dakota would end the second quarter with 7 straight points. Allison Arns buries it from long range. She had 11 points. Bison trail 42-27 at the half. Thunstedt would hit her 4th and final 3 of the night to start the scoring in the second half. She had a team-high 16 points, but South Dakota would end the third quarter on an 18-4 run to pull away for good. J.C. Bradley a game-high 23 points, including 5 of 10 from three-point range. The Yotes rolled to the victory, 80-48. The Bison scored just 21 second-half points and were 6 of 20 from three-point range. The Herd returned home to take on Oral Roberts in the Play 4K Pink game at the Shield Center. There were 8 lead changes in the first quarter alone. Taylor Thunstedt a pair of long threes, this to give NDSU an early lead. Emily Spear provided a nice spark off the bench, facing up, hitting the short jumper. The senior led the Bison with 8 rebounds as well. Freshman Riley Nudell hit both of her attempts from long range as well, as both teams continue to go back and forth. But ORU a 12-2 run to end the second quarter. Faith Iham driving inside for 2. She had 14 points and 14 rebounds. Golden Eagles led by 5 at the half. In the second half, the Bison offense stymied by Oral Roberts. Anna Goodhope scoring 6 of the team's 10 points in the third quarter, including the and one. Brianna Jones limited to just 7 points and 2 rebounds by the Golden Eagles. The lay-in early here in the fourth quarter, but ORU would pull away. Kaylin Mayberry using the screen and driving to the basket for the lay-in. She had a game-high 21 points. Bison lose their 5th straight, 70-50 the final. 18 NDSU turnovers led to 25 Golden Eagle points. Players hoping to turn things around now in the second half of conference play.
We need to come out strong in practice. We need to come out strong in warm-ups. We need to come out strong in games. It's just something that we have to have a pop to our step right away. We have to throw that first punch. I think that's a big part of it.
When you're on the losing streak, it is hard to, to come into practice and try to stay positive. But I think as a senior, that's really the only choice that I have. People are looking at me and looking at how I respond and react to, games like this. And I have to stay positive. And the biggest thing that I know Coach wants me to do is just keep encouraging my teammates, just stay positive. And encouragement is the biggest thing.
The Bison are now 3-6 in Summit League play and are all alone in 7th place in the conference standings. Stay with us after the break. We will sit down with women's head coach Coach Walseth to get her thoughts on the past week and also take a look ahead. That's coming up next. Welcome back to the Bison Basketball Show. We are now joined by NDSU women's head coach Coach Walseth to break down the last week. A couple of tough contests going to South Dakota. I think we knew that was going to be tough based on how well they played there and certainly what happened on your home floor against them. Brianna Jones, Emily Spear, just before the break, talk about the importance of we have to move on to the next play, the next possession, the next practice, the next game. But it really comes down to the next possession and just putting everything in the rearview mirror. What's the importance for that for a team that is going through maybe a little bit of a difficult stretch right now?
I think it's a difficult stretch, and it's also kind of the growing pains, So we talk about the next play, the next play, the next play, and the next play being the most important one. There's nothing we can do about the one we just had, but the next play is the most important play to make a positive impact on what the next outcome will be.
Sometimes, Martin, when you have young players and experienced players and things, don't always go well, and you have this stretch where things don't go well, things can snowball a little bit. And I think maybe we've seen that in the last couple of games where there has been stretches. You started the game against Oral Roberts really well. South Dakota, similar situation. All of a sudden, a few plays go awry, and all of a sudden, boom. Is that one of those things that you as a coach just have to guard against the best you can, because that is going to happen at times?
It is, and a little bit of it is working through adversity. And for young players, that can be challenging, but for some of the veterans, it can be challenging as well. So when there is adversity, whether it's a bad foul or we miss a shot or they score in transition, being able to refocus quickly on, again, that next play.
The other thing the players mentioned was, hey, we still have a whole half of conference play to go. We can't just focus on what's happened these last few games. We have to look ahead and say we have a whole month to get better. And I think for you, from a progress standpoint, that's a lot of time. A month is a lot of time to improve, isn't it?
It is. For the seniors, they still have a whole month of basketball. For the freshmen, they have a whole month to continue to get better. And I think we've seen the ups and the downs throughout the duration of our season, but our resiliency has really gotten us through and to this point, and I'm confident that we will continue to get better.
When I think Oral Roberts, one of the best defensive teams in the league, turnovers and offensive rebounds, I think were the two things in that game that really hurt you. Now, usually a really good rebounding team, but it almost felt like maybe one affected the other to a point.
A little bit. I think Oral Roberts, their guards are very active rebounding. So certainly Faith Ehem is an extremely talented athlete and rebounder, but a lot of those offensive rebounds came from on the perimeter and the guards crashing. And then maybe that's a little bit different for us, or we weren't quite as in tune to boxing out from the perimeter. So that was a challenge.
South Dakota State tonight, then off for the weekend before hosting Western Illinois next week. What do you focus on most now against South Dakota State? And then after that game, that whole week before you play Western Illinois, what is kind of the focus for you and the coaching staff here moving forward?
Right, it's about us right now and preparing for the things that SDSU is going to do to us. And then we do have some time to regroup, rest some legs, and then refocus and again take care of our home court.
I know you talked about some of the young players that you think have made steps in the right direction. We've seen that with Riley Jacobson. You talked about Riley Nudell a little bit. She does look more confident on the floor. Confidence, frankly, is half the battle, I think, with a lot of these kids when they take the floor, just believing they can compete at this level. Right.
Every freshman has improved from day one, and some of them a little bit faster, and then they plateau for a minute or are slow and then they speed up. But the conversation with Riley Nudell has been, we need you to be more aggressive, and then that can look different, attacking the basket, rebounding. But I think we saw versus Oral Roberts her confidence really to play incredibly intense defense, but also shoot the three ball without thinking. And that's something that our team needs her to do.
Well, good luck against South Dakota State tonight, and then we will see you next week when you take on Western Illinois a doubleheader. That'll be a fun one as well.
It will. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Coach Walseth here joining us on the Bison Basketball Show. Greg Steman, our analyst for Midco Sports Network, will join us after this timeout to talk a little bit about the Bison men and women at the midway point. That's coming up next. Welcome back to the Bison Basketball Show. Brian Shaw now joined by our esteemed colleague and analyst, that is Greg Steman, who's along for all our NDSU men's and women's basketball telecasts. Greg, first half of the season in the books. When you look back, we start with the men. Tough games across the board, every single one, whether it was home or road. They had very few contests that weren't decided in the final 4 minutes. Surprised that the team was able to get to 7-1 and find ways to win all those games, especially on the road.
You know, I won't say surprised. The reason I say that is because I think they really have an experienced core group that knows what it takes to win tough games. I still think even in this era of increased scoring in the Summit League, I still think that NDSU has the ability to string some stops together on the defensive end. And I think they've got guys that understand what it takes to win close games. And so I may be surprised at how close some of them were and how hard NDSU had to work to come back from behind in some of those. But I tell you what, I think it's certainly a testament to their character. But as Coach Richman and everybody else will tell you, they're only halfway done with this thing.
Yeah, I think that's the reality of it, is you still got some tough road games ahead, plus some tough home games now with South Dakota State, and certainly Denver. 3 teams that I know would love to get payback here. As for Denver, an opportunity for them to sweep North Dakota State in the series. These are 3 big home games now coming up for the Bison.
They really are, and that's where they have to, make their hay. They finish with 2 on the road to end the season. But even today, or earlier this week, to start the second half of the season, the 2 teams closest to NDSU are playing each other. So one of those is going to have 4 losses, to finish the second half. And what is also interesting, both USD and Denver have to finish with 5 of their final 8 on the road. And NDSU has 4 on the road, 4 at home. But I know that any coach will tell you, hey, they've still just got to find a way to play them one at a time, and different teams match up differently with other teams. And NDSU really struggled out at Denver. When they do get Denver back home, which is a ways down the road, it's certainly going to be a challenge for them.
When we came out of the non-conference season, I think you and I both wondered, where are they going to step up their play? Who is going to step up? How is their play going to elevate once they get into Summit League play? We've seen almost everybody on this roster from 1 through 10 that play some minutes take some steps forward, but it's really been the young guys like the Tyson Wards, the Jared Samuelsons, even the Dengus at time. Those minutes those guys are playing are critical minutes.
Critical minutes is right. In a huge win when they beat Oral Roberts here last week, Tyson Ward was on the game, on the floor when the game was decided, and made some key plays during that stretch. And so I think he's someone, along with Dengu and Samuelson, it's all about what you need at what time during the game. When you look at NDSU, Paul Miller's in the top 10 in scoring. Nobody else is in the top 20. They've got different guys that step up. People will think I'm crazy. I think Dexter Werner, he's a guy that's coming off the bench. I not only think he's one of a first-team type player in this league, I think he should be an MVP candidate when you look at all things considered. A lot of people will laugh at that because they'll look at the statistics, but with what Dexter Werner brings to this floor for this Bison team, it's literally irreplaceable.
When you think about it, too, even the game against Oral Roberts last week, a really good indication. Carlin Dupree, 11 points in the first half, goes unnoticed. Dexter Werner only plays 2 minutes. Dexter Werner, 19 second half points. It takes everybody this time of the year.
It really does, and I guarantee you Carlin Dupree is going to be on the floor and at the end of some huge games down the stretch as well. They've got a lot of guys they can go to.
Let's switch gears to the women a little bit. The Bison women, it's been a roller coaster ride. And again, feeling really good about themselves at 3-1, beating South Dakota here, and then going on a slide a little bit. What happens with a young team like this one, the ebbs and flows, because some of them physically might be hitting a wall. Their bodies, Mara and Walseth told us last week, maybe getting to a point where their body is telling them to stop doing this right now because they've never played basketball this long consecutively.
It's a great point, Brian, and when you have a young team, your scope of things that you do well is not very broad. And that's just a reality, and I think that's what this North Dakota State women's team has to do, is really focus on what things that they do well and what things allow them to be successful, and they can't stray from that, because it's something that you want to do when you start to experience some success, but you have to realize what got you there. And I think their scope of things they do well is narrow, but yet at the same time, when they do those things well, they can compete against some of the better teams, as they demonstrated against the USD.
Sometimes we talk about confidence as kind of one of those really fragile things, especially with young kids and even 18 to 22-year-olds across the board. We've seen when this team has confidence, they really play really well. And then when things maybe don't go so well, some kids get a little bit sheepish. out on the floor a little bit. That's one thing that you just have to go through, I think, as a coach and know that's going to be an issue, right?
It is, and this is the boring coach in me that comes out. What you have to do during those times is rely on the things you can control, your effort on the defensive end, your willingness to communicate. Allow your success defensively to feed into success on the offensive end. Go back to your reliables and the things you can control. That's what young teams have to do to experience more success.
And North Dakota State, if they can just string a couple more wins together here in the second half, at least get into the tournament in Sioux Falls, and I know that's important as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's going to be difficult for them. Both South Dakota State and USD playing at a very high level, but at the same time, get in the tournament.
Getting into the tournament. That's key number one for the Bison women. Thank you so much, Greg, for joining us.
My
we'll
pleasure.
see you down the road. All right, Greg Steman joining us here on the Bison Basketball Show. We'll be back to wrap things up and take a look ahead after this.
The Bison Basketball Show on Midco Sports Network is presented by NODAC Mutual Insurance Company and Midco Windows.
Back to wrap things up here on the Bison Basketball Show, and we have a busy slate of games ahead for you on Midco Sports Network. It all starts with NDSU hosting South Dakota on the men's side Saturday at 2 p.m. on Midco SN2. Then on Wednesday, the Bison will take on rival South Dakota State at the Shields Center at 8 p.m. That can also be seen on Midco Sports Network. As for the Bison women, they will hit the road to take on South Dakota State tonight, returning home to play Western Illinois on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Those two matchups can also be seen on Midco Sports Network as well. That will do it for this week. We will see you next time on the Bison Basketball Show.